The Answer.
If you're talking about it, I'll be talking about it. Dennis Prager here. Join me this morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy, Kristen McQuarrie, Chicago Tribune, Ed Board. And Kristen, the veto override, even though it is punishing on Illinois families because of the taxes it imposes and the Ponzi scheme it props up for just a little while longer, was politically beneficial to Governor Rauner. May have salvaged his governorship because he now gets to be the guy who vetoed the tax increase only to be overridden by the political class in Springfield. It gives him an opportunity to stand against both Republicans and Democrats and try and recapture a little bit of that maverick outsider brand that he had when he was a candidate that he's otherwise spent the last 2.5 years diluting, including the last 2.5 weeks, where he was in exile, effectively, intellectually, at least.
He was not around. He was not part of any of the last-minute negotiations. If you think that would have been helpful, I don't know. But the leaders' meetings, they met without him. So.
He's tried to play the inside game, and he's gotten beaten at every turn. He's, rather than stoking the revolt, he's been the I'm going to be a reasonable compromise guy, and he spent most of the time on this matter of the budget and tax increases and structural reforms talking to himself in public, which is unappealing. And then he issues statements like this in response to the veto override yesterday. He said, "Today was another step in Illinois' never-ending tragic trail of tax hikes. Speaker Madigan's 32% permanent income tax increase will force another tax hike in the near future. His tax and spend plan is not balanced, does not cut enough spending or pay down enough debt, does not help grow jobs or restore confidence in government. It proves how desperately we need real property tax relief and term limits. Now more than ever, the people of Illinois must fight for change that will help us create a brighter future." He's right about the forthcoming tax hikes. Pritzker gets in, let's just say, for example, even Kennedy. Then you'll see, and Democrats, thanks to the surrender Republicans, continue to enjoy their majorities, maybe regain a supermajority in the House, who knows. Then you'll see a move to tax pension income. You'll see a move maybe even to amend the Constitution to graduate the state income tax.
You think Rauner will do this?
No, if you have a Democrat governor with Democrat
Right.
majorities or supermajorities in the General Assembly, you will be California minus the property tax cap.
Although they didn't do, it's one of the things that irks me when Democrats take their anger out on Rauner or Republicans for those reasons, no graduated income tax, and for letting the 2011 tax expire. They could have done it. They had a supermajority and Pat Quinn for 6 years begging them to do it. They didn't do it. So
Well,
I don't know that under a Democratic governor it would be.
Well, sure, because you'll have
different.
Republican cover. That's what happens here. They raise taxes when they have surrender Republicans provide political cover, so they maintain their majorities. That's how Madigan's always done it, and he will continue to do it that way. You know why? Because it works.
But he also doesn't need cover. In 2011, after that tax hike, not a single Democrat lost a seat.
Well,
they gained supermajorities in 2012. Now, it was under the new map.
That speaks.
But that was after a 67% four-year income tax hike.
That speaks to the quality of the leadership of the Republican Party. But I could just going back to this Rauner statement, I have to say something about this. You know why he's irrelevant, and it's largely been irrelevant. Partly because of his absence. That's a choice, and also because of this sort of milquetoast statement. Namby-pamby, nothing statements after a watershed moment in Illinois history generating unprecedented levels of anger and exasperation. This is different than even 2011, which isn't that long ago. So here's what he does, these statements. Dice up Madigan, garnish with the tired bromides, add a dollop of Ursop's optimism at the end, and serve this tasteless Rauner rice cake to ruin the appetites of a ravenous electorate. He doesn't feed the revolt. He starves it. And that's why, despite the destruction that was wrought before him and the destruction that's continuing to be wrought with him at the hands of Chicago Democrats with surrender Republicans, he is in real jeopardy of not being reelected. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. It in no way is a proper adjective to apply to Ronner anymore. Maverick. That's not what he's been. He's got a very short period of time to decide who he's going to be. Is he going to be the transactional, amoral politician that I think he is, and I have from the beginning? He's Rahm Emanuel. And just try and win the press war each day and try and accomplish nothing big and offer nothing big. Just try and grind it out the way Tiny Dancer's in the city. And Tiny Dancer's got a much more favorable field of play than does the governor. Or is he going to take something resembling a risk and speak with moral clarity and make arguments for the next year and a half about the future of the state? To me, that's the choice before him. He has made the former choice for the past 2.5 years. If he doesn't make the latter choice for the next 18 months, he's done.
I agree with the latter part of your commentary, but I don't think you are really taking into consideration what he is up against.
Oh, I'm taking
with
into
this
full
legislature.
consideration. Taking it into full consideration.
As soon as he came in, they blocked him at every move. They didn't pick up any of his bills. He did file bills to do a lot of this on his agenda.
Kristen, just stop. 15 House Republicans and Dale Ryder in the Senate. If he is providing the leadership, galvanizing the party, and thus galvanizing the electorate to rebel against the political royals in Springfield, the Chicago Democrats, starting with Madigan, then you don't have the fifth column action that occurred in the special session.
So don't you think that this is less about his leadership and stoking the rebellion than it is he wanted the tax hike? It helps him. It relieves a huge pressure valve for him. He gets a budget. He could not have been reelected, absolutely, if he did not have a budget. He at least has that now. I don't think he ran as a candidate who was not opposed to a tax hike. So I don't think he was.
But not
I think you're expecting something of him that was never going to happen.
I disagree that he couldn't win if he didn't do a terrible deal or a terrible deal didn't get done. Completely disagree with that. But if what you say is possible, that he actually wanted this, then that makes it even worse, doesn't it? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend, State Representative Tom Morris, Republican from Palatine. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Kristen.
So I've launched the Fire the 15 campaign today. Those 15 of your colleagues that voted for this tax hike, and 10 of whom voted to override the governor's veto of it. How do you react to that?
How do you react? All around, it's a bad situation. And what I can do, what I have tried to do, is listen to what my constituents are saying. Look, I ran in 2010, which was a watershed year for reform-minded Republicans. As a small business owner, the frustrations that I felt trying to make a payroll, compete in a increasingly hostile environment, is what motivated me to run, and that's, I've tried to maintain that level of passion and commitment to reform as long as the people have continued to reelect me. I've got colleagues in my caucus that have different districts. They have significantly higher percentages of public employees who are fighting for their own self-preservation. And that's really what the fight is about. And I don't think it's right to raise taxes, maintain the same status quo for the entire state. When we saw what happened in 2011, it accelerated the exodus of people wanting to leave the state, actually leaving the state. It puts us in a worse situation when we're shrinking our tax base at the very time when our budgets continue to expand because of pensions, because of Medicaid.
So, Representative, what do you think to the idea that the governor didn't really exert a lot of influence in trying to corral those 15 members? What did you see from the inside?
Look, I'm not an insider. I'll just put that right out there. I'm not an insider in my caucus. I'm not an insider with the governor. So I can't speak to that.
Well, Dan and I are in a fight, so pick a side on this. Pick a side on this point. I don't put all 15 in one category. I have empathy for people like Terry Bryant and Reggie Phillips, who are generally fiscally conservative and vote with you and others, but we're in a really, really tough situation in this particular vote in just trying to end the impasse. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I mean, here's the thing. If you're, David Harris said, because of these growing unpaid bills, we paid $800 million in interest. That's a true statement. Now, I started to see where this was going 2 years ago, that there was not the appetite for the real reforms necessary that might justify an income tax increase. If there was relief elsewhere on our property taxes, they were talking about adding a sales tax on services. Where's the talk about reducing the sales tax then on goods that just maybe might justify that? Where are the reforms that would give us confidence, give us as taxpayers confidence that we're actually going to stop the growth in the unfunded liability in pensions or the growth in Medicaid? Where are the really significant reforms like you see in Indiana and some other states with Republican leadership, real Republican leadership, that would cap the growth in those programs? And over time, you didn't see that. And so, the best, most honest thing to do is to tell our citizens, no, we can't do this. We're going to shut it down. There were more of us who voted.
Well, Tom, not to interrupt, but this is exactly it. This is what the Republican Party fails to do, generally speaking. I'm not speaking to you specifically. Explain to people what the numbers are, what the deal is, what the challenges are, and make your case rather than just stake out a position. Let's use Eastern Illinois University as an example, since that was the lever for both Dale Ryder in the Senate, the one Republican who got the tax increase over the hump in the Senate, and Reggie Phillips, one of the 15 surrender Republicans. EIU has received $515 million in state subsidies over the last decade. Subsidies are up 40% over that time, while enrollment at EIU is down 40%. The graduation rate, 32%. The tuition versus conference peers, Eastern Illinois University versus in-state tuition for Indiana State across the border. Eastern Illinois is 11,730 for in-state. Indiana State is 8,746. 1,300 employees at 1,300 or so employees at EIU. $100 million in salary funded by taxpayers. $180 million budget to graduate 900 students per year. $180 million budget to graduate 900 students per year. It seems to me that if you made the case, even in those districts, people would say, you know what, that's a setup that doesn't make any frackin' sense to me. And EIU is just one example, and higher ed is just one example. This entire state is a big scam because we just talk about inputs and everybody's intentions. We don't talk about how the actual systems or institutions operate, what they achieve, and at what price.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, and that's why one of the things, when we talk about consolidation of government, that is one example of that. Why do these schools have, if they're shrinking in student population, why don't we shrink the entire university rather than maintaining the bloated administration, the bloated numbers of professors? That's what the private sector has to do, that constantly. You make adjustments based upon the realities, and what we saw is, protecting the provincial interests.
Do you think there should be Do you think there should be a leadership change in the House for House Republicans? Is it time for Durkin to give way to somebody else?
Look, I don't know who would rise up to do that. I'm not prepared to do that. There are people in this caucus who I more agree with, in terms of where the direction of the state should go. But I don't know who would step up and make a challenge at this point.
What would you say about, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
What would you say so the Democrats are going to go around, and they already are, talking about the budget that they passed, that it was bipartisan, that it was balanced, that it spent less, that it did have cuts in it. What is the response from the Republicans to them now going around talking about the actual budget? Because some of that is true. It does have cuts in it. What would you say to that?
I mean, we are essentially maintaining the status quo. What this does not do, it doesn't touch the $15 billion in unpaid bills. It does not do nearly enough to address the unfunded pension liability. And so, when my constituents write to me and say, what's different? How I said on the floor yesterday, yeah, it's true. We do need a budget for predictability, but the solution here was predictable. We ran out of the taxpayers' money, and so we're going to go back to the well. And, as far as the bipartisan nature of it, it does make our messaging a lot more difficult. There's no question about that.
No question about that, indeed. He is State Representative Tom Morrison, Republican from Palatine. We're decrying the 15, but there are some people down there that are principled and transparent and thoughtful, and Tom Morrison is one of them. Tom, appreciate you joining us as always. Thanks.
Thank you.
And he joined us on the turnkey.pro answer line.